Hey everybody, Garry Adelman, American Battlefield Trust. I'm not quite worn out yet. This is Gettysburg 158. We got Kris White behind the camera, and we're going around the battlefield, really trying to focus more on people and units of the Civil War. We're trying to get down to the enlisted men. I think you've seen us doing that already. We're going to try to do it more. But something else that we're going to do, and that we're doing, is we become cognizant. This is our 5th anniversary video set, going back to Gettysburg 154, and we've started to realize where we've gone and where we haven't. So we pulled out the order of battle and a map of the battlefield. We're trying to go to places we haven't gone yet. If you don't see us going to your favorite place, look for Gettysburg 154, 55, 56, and 57, and I think there's a good chance that we'll have covered that already. But we are on the north extremity of Little Round Top. This is Sedgwick Avenue, going off to the north here, as the Wheatfield Road crosses it. In the 1880s and 1890s, there was a huge park around here called Round Top Park. There was a roller rink, there were 2 places to eat, there were 2 photo studios, there was a casino. Could you imagine that? Casino at Gettysburg, what a bad idea. There was a sort of a semi-brothel here for a while. There was a huge fight as to whether Gettysburg would be a historic shrine or a giant amusement park. So this is a place where, really the future of Gettysburg was in part decided, and eventually, of course, the historic site won over, at least for the most part, okay? But we're not here to talk so much about that. I want to talk about some of the people and units over here. So here we are on the north side of Little Round Top. I guess we must be right near the 83rd Pennsylvania Monument or the 20th Maines Monument. No, in fact, we're not even near the monument of any 5th Corps soldiers. In fact, you're going to see a couple of markers here to 12th Corps soldiers. For those of you who follow the battle, we all really know that it's the 5th Corps that comes over here. But before the 5th Corps is ever here, some elements, 2 regiments of Garry's brigade, the 5th Ohio, a marker here, and the 147th Pennsylvania, who I think you're going to see in a video that we'll post about Culp's Hill, later this evening here. So the 5th Ohio is formed around Cincinnati. This is a unit, I think, with a Scottish colonel. I think his name is Holiday. Maybe before the end of this video, Kris will break out his legendary Scottish accent. But I will not be doing mine now. But this John Holiday actually was mortally wounded in 1864, at New Hope Church in the Atlanta campaign. And what you're going to find is that a lot of the officers fought on Little Round Top. While this was not the most costly place, these units ended up being in the thick of it in 1864. So I think you're going to constantly see some of this. 147th PA, by the way, is from Philadelphia, Lieutenant Colonel Ario J. Pardee, who will later fight around Culp's Hill and get a field named after him. Pardee Field is this particular unit here. These guys are here on July 1st, 1863. Before the 3rd Corps is out, before the 5th Corps is out, General Meade and, Hancock and Howard were concerned for the Union left. It's really interesting that if you're going to send soldiers out to Little Round Top, it didn't have that name yet, are you really just guarding the Wheatfield Road? Is that why those markers are here? Or wouldn't you have pushed a little bit up so you'd have a better view? Now, a lot of these woods weren't here, and they probably had a pretty good view. But it's a pretty interesting thing to contemplate. None of us really know exactly where the 147th PA and the 5th Ohio were. But the veterans came back and put their monuments there. Maybe some of the troops up here who actually did all the fighting up here didn't want other monuments competing, with them. So pretty interesting thing about this monumentation, and that the battle and the positions on Little Round Top, they were here for all 3 days of the battle, not just on July 2nd and 3rd. Now, one other thing I'm going to show you, and we're going to cross the road, and we're not going to really see it, actually, so we don't have to cross the road. But if we were to cross the road and it weren't so thick in there, I could take you to an artillery brigade plaque, okay? That is Martin's Brigade of Artillery, and that's the 5th Corps Artillery Brigade. Actually, we can see it. Check it out. So there's actually a little view right up to it over there. And let me see if I can find the picture without too much drama or trouble. I'm not sure if Kris has it there. It looks like he's looking for it. I can see it. We know each other's machinations. Let's see who finds it first. I'm almost there. Here we go. Here it is if you want it, Kris. So here are veterans of Martin's, in the 1913 reunion standing there. But if you were to look, you could see a rock on the background, and that rock is actually right over there. Okay, so something's going on. Well, what we now know is that the avenues up Little Round Top, when cars were going like 11 miles an hour, they were curved everywhere. There was no reason to make them straight. And then when cars started going as fast as this car is, oh my God, 20, 26 miles an hour, they straightened out all the curves. And that means that this road used to go on the other side of that monument. And therefore, when you go onto the road, here's the modern photo for this on the bottom here. So this is the same view. You see what they did. They turned the monument so that people from this road might have some chance of seeing it. But when they turned it, it swiveled on its base, but they didn't move the base, so it's cockeyed. That's one of the little nerd things about Little Round Top and about all historic sites. You can go out and learn a little bit more about how the battlefield is actually changing. We're walking up the northern slope of Little Round Top where most people don't go, and we're about to come to some of the other units you don't really think about. That's right, 6th Corps soldiers on Little Round Top. Artillery on Little Round Top that isn't just from a U.S. battery. Specifically, I'm talking about the 121st New York's monument you're going to see up here, the 98th Pennsylvania up here, and Gibbs's battery, and even another monument that's not even here anymore, the 5th Maine battery, the 5th Maine monument, which has been moved since. So this was an interesting part of Little Round Top. In fact, when you used to come visit Little Round Top in the 1890s or so, the road only went to partway up the hill. So everybody saw these monuments first. Check this out. Now Kris is looking here at the 121st Pennsylvania, 121st New York, a 6th Corps unit that didn't fight so much on Little Round Top. Their Colonel Emory Upton, famous for a couple of things, of course, developing sort of a novel attack and leading it near the Muleshoe, Spotsylvania, and there he is right here. And then, of course, for his suicide at the Presidio in San Francisco. Look at our California video series that we actually did a few years back here. But you know, while he was here, you know, because you can see the view from here, even though we're on the lower slopes, it's a great view on Little Round Top. On July 4th, the day after the Battle of Gettysburg, he said he watched Pickett's charge from here and said, "Lee's attack was inspiring and sublime. For about 10 minutes, it seemed that the weight of a hair would have turned the scales of the battle." You know, a lot of people who were up here, you know, wrote about watching Pickett's charge. Most of them wrote about their own experience, but they talked about this grand spectacle. And I think that's one of the reasons why Pickett's charge is probably the most famous attack in American history. You could see it near population centers. It was grand, maybe as far north as the Confederates got, sort of, depending on how you count, or at least as far north as they fought. Let's continue on here. You're with the American Battlefield Trust. We're on the north slope of Little Round Top. We're going to make our way to the crest, to the better ways, to the better known parts of the hill, and we'll talk about the fighting, of course, but our focus is going to be upon people and units. Now, why are these 6th Corps units here? The 6th Corps was the reserve for the Army, and they freed up the previous reserve, the 5th Corps, okay? But when the 6th Corps arrived, and that is the 121st New York, the 1st Brigade to arrive was actually Nevin's Brigade of Wheaton's division of the 6th Corps. Wheaton's a new division commander because his division commander, a guy named Newton, was placed in command of Doubleday's division, or of the 1st Corps, I'm sorry, when Doubleday didn't exactly have the trust, you know, of the overall high command here at Gettysburg. The first one to arrive on the hill seems to have been the 98th Pennsylvania. In the van of Nevin's brigade here at Gettysburg, he got detached from the other ones. So the rest of the brigade is over north of the Wheatfield Road, and these guys, John B. Kohler, German guy, went and charged down this hill. One of the soldiers, a guy named Stiles, I think it wasn't Harry, but I think it was Henry Stiles, if memory serves me right, was actually charging down the hill, and he got shot in the head, you know, by some artillery rounds or something like that, or by a bullet, I can't remember. And they took him to the hospital. He survived, and they extracted the metal from his head along with 17 different pieces of his skull. I read that in his pension record. So, I mean, that was his charge down this way. When he's charging, this is after the famous fight for Little Round Top. This is when the U.S. regulars had already charged out and fallen back, and the 98th PA charged sort of ahead of and along with Crawford's division when the Pennsylvania Reserves charged down here a little bit later in the day, probably 7:30 p.m., a solid hour and a half after most of the fighting for Little Round Top. Now, we're going to walk only a little ways. We're not going to go all the way out there, but you can see a very little visited place. This is called Gibbs's Ledge.
Just to orient you, we're looking towards Devil's Den. We're on the north side of Little Round Top. We started off looking at a hill called Munshauer's Knoll today. Just below it would have been Swisher's Hill. So if you come over top of Big Round Top, you'd have the largest hill, then you come to Little Round Top, Munshauer's Knoll, then Swisher's Hill. And this was key on July 1st because one of the reasons the 12th Corps comes up here is kind of as a fallback position. Henry Slocum doesn't know what he's getting into, and he kind of spreads the 12th Corps out all over the place. And some of the units are here here, some are up at Powers Hill, some are over on the Baltimore Pike, some end up on Benner's Hill for a little while as a timely diversion. And then the 6th Corps is doing the same thing the next day. They're going to be plugging the gaps where it needs to be. And the 121st New York Upton's Regulars, commanded by Emory Upton, is one of many officers from the West Point War class of May and June of 1861 to fight up here on Little Round Top, or at least hold a position here on Little Round Top on July 2nd and 3rd.
And, you know, Emory Upton's not the only one to meet a sad end long after the Civil War. During the Civil War, you're going to have the commander of the 98th, who's actually, if you look now at the front of their monument, you can see the blue Greek cross. Remember, the Corps badges and the Greek cross is the 6th Corps are color-coded, red, white, blue, green, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th Division. So you already know that that's a 3rd Division of the 6th Corps without even reading anything on the monument. John B. Kohler will be killed the following year. I need to look at my cheat sheet again. He's killed at Cedar Creek. Again, another officer who is going to be, you know, disabled or worse as a result of some of the fighting here. Now, Gibbs's battery is actually formed at the same camp, Camp Dennison at Cincinnati, as the 5th Ohio. So you've got sort of people knowing each other and fighting right near each other. Gibbs, and for all that this is called Gibbs's Ledge, he's only got 2 or 3 guns on this ledge, and he's going to put the other guns on the north side of the Wheatfield Road. Now, I say 2 or 3, it could be even 4. People argue about this. Where were his guns? How many did he have where? But we do know that he straddled the Wheatfield Road. That's one of the few wartime roads in this area. All the other avenues, such as Crawford Avenue there, or Sykes Avenue we were just walking on, and Warren Avenue on the other side there, and Sickles Avenue, all those are things that were built for us, for visitors to be able to visit and see the battlefield a little bit better. So Gibbs is going to have some good service up here, and remember, there's the battle for Little Round Top, and then the U.S. regulars, 2 different brigades, one under strength especially, is going to charge across this ground toward the Wheatfield, and the Wheatfield is just beyond that next set of trees. Those trees are on the top of Houck's Ridge, and the Wheatfield is just beyond it there. They're going to meet a disaster in the Wheatfield, and some of Gibbs's cannoneers are waiting for the regulars to come back so that they can shoot at the Confederates coming toward them, okay? You know, at this point, the Southerners are flushed with victory. This is maybe 6:37, 7:15 p.m. before the Pennsylvania reserves are here, and the Confederates are actually pushing through the Wheatfield. This is the weakened remnants of Kershaw, Semmes, Anderson, and the less weak Wofford here, and this is their last push. They're going to attack Little Round Top from this side, but supposedly it looked kind of like a wave on a beach, just pushing forward a little bit more and then back. It didn't have much punch to it. And then the Pennsylvania reserves arrived, and everywhere the Confederates came, the Union just seemed to have mountains of reinforcements, and that's the story of the Battle of Gettysburg. Wherever the Southerners were gaining or had a chance to gain, the interior lines, the superior numbers, and if you ask me, General Meade using his interior lines well to shift troops back and forth, and a little luck, really just won the day in almost every case, you know, for the Union. The Confederates made rather few permanent gains at Gettysburg, and they would later lose all of those the following day. So now we're going to double back. The exceedingly rough terrain would prevent us from walking from Gibbs Ledge to the next place that we want to go. And I think as we're walking up the hill, let's set the stage a little bit for the Battle of Little Round Top. So I think you know some of this. It's July 2nd. The fighting hasn't started yet. And, you know, there's going to be a political general up here that didn't go to West Point. You've heard of him. His name is Dan Sickles. And Kris, maybe you want to talk about him and Warren. What's the high command going on here? You want me to grab the camera real quick?
Oh, we're good. I was trying to find a picture. So Dan Sickles, he is a great guy to read about if you don't want to believe anything someone says. Dan Sickles is a Tammany Hall politician, which is a political machine in New York City. He's a Democrat, and he is going to get his general star based off of the fact that he has political connections, and then he is going to kind of kiss up to the last commander, a guy named Joe Hooker, Mr. F.J. Hooker, as Robert E. Lee calls him.
You know, let's get Kris on camera here if he's going to be talking.
So Sickles will end up in charge of the 3rd Corps. Technically, 3rd Corps was supposed to go to Oliver Otis Howard, who's in charge of the 11th Corps, because he outranked Dan Sickles. And he throws a big temper tantrum, Howard does. He gets 11th Corps. That's another part of the battle we'll talk about. Now, with Sickles, he's going to command at Chancellorsville. He loses a little bit more than 4,500 men at the Battle of Chancellorsville, and he's really going to be weakened coming here to Gettysburg, because not only does he lose men in battle, he's also going to lose men to enlistments expiring. So he has about 10,000 men. He decides, because he had to give up high ground at Chancellorsville, he wasn't going to do that here. He pushes out, and he's going to put up a line out along the Emmitsburg Road. He's going to jut it back through the wheat field now, the peach orchard. Remember, these places aren't named yet. We don't know them just yet. And then eventually it'll terminate at the base of Little Round Top, about 800 yards from where we are. Now, when George Gordon Meade, the Union Army commander, just in charge of the Army for a few days, goes out front, he's aghast at what he sees. And by the time he realizes what happens, it's far too late. And now Meade is gonna have to start sending troops out towards where we are. Luckily, he had troops like the 5th Corps who were here. The 5th Corps were his former unit. Meade was a corps commander prior to this battle. But then Meade, his corps was weakened on the way to Gettysburg due to enlistments expiring. So he's gonna pick up some troops called the Pennsylvania Reserves along the way, guys he had commanded in 1862, and now we'll have the 5th Corps starting to arrive here. And that Wheatfield Road is a perfect way to start shifting troops onto the battlefield. So we'll have the 5th Corps start marching down that Wheatfield Road, and then atop this hill, we'll have a 33-year-old New York general named Gouverneur Kimball Warren, who will come up here, look out over this landscape and say, man, this is a really bad thing not to have troops up here. At the same time, he notices there's a fight that's gonna start taking place down in Devil's Den. Artillery pieces will be lined up to face towards the south. Most people think we're facing towards the west, towards the wheat field in the big valley of death. No, the Union is gonna have to set up facing towards the south to extend Sickles' line. And the Confederates, using exterior lines, will have to wrap, and finally wrap around that Union flank, trying to ever find it, that Union left flank. And we'll have John Bell Hood start initiating his assault, and then eventually Lafayette McLaws. But this will become one of the culminating points for at least a portion of the 5th Corps, as well as some of the 3rd Corps troops who will be down in the valley below trying to connect with these troops up here.
Cool, thanks, Kris. So, just to talk about some of the terrain here, the original road up here actually made a hairpin turn right there. It was pretty sharp, and it actually came here. So you're on the original road to Little Round Top, Habit, and this was actually a turnaround here. So this was as far as you would come, and look what you would see. Standing above all, you'd have this beautiful view, your first real view of Little Round Top from a higher elevation, and you'd see the 155th Pennsylvania, Lieutenant Colonel, I believe, Herman Kane. They are organized, where is that, Kris?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and John Heron Kane is up here, along with the 146th New York, whose monument you might be able to see over there. And if we went up a little bit further, we'd see the 91st Pennsylvania. These are 3 regiments you don't hear about, but these are the regiments of Weed's brigade that you don't hear about. There's another one you hear about, the 140th New York, because they come in at the nick of the moment. They're the first ones there, and they really help to save the day. These other guys get up here, they take position here, they perform valuable service, but they're not in the thickest of the fighting. And by the way, 2 of the 3 colonels of these, or commanders of these units, will be mortally wounded or out of service within a year as well. Again, showing how intense how real things got for the men of the 5th and the 6th Corps. And I think the commanders are just an example. I think the same or worse could be said of the enlisted men, of the foot soldiers that are here. Now, one reason I wanted to have you have us come out here actually is to show some of this. So first of all, not only did you always have this great view, but here's what this monument used to look like. In fact, if we line it up here, you can see that this is what you could build with privately raised funds. You can see the Maltese Cross and everything like that. They'd always hoped to improve it. And then in 1887, after this was put up, the Pennsylvania legislature awarded $1,500 to every regiment that fought here from Pennsylvania. And they were able to add the Zouave. Kris will correct me if I'm wrong. They weren't dressed as Zouaves here, but they were by the following year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Good. Thanks. Kris is much better on uniforms and many other things than I am. So, this was this interesting thing, and you can already see kind of a carriage visiting this section. And when the War Department came in 1895, after the monument had been improved, suddenly you have a full-on road here, and you have a retaining wall there with a fence and everything like that. You can see this cool old car. I'll let some of you all, figure out what year that might be or something like that. And of course, you can see the full monument here. Look at the view. We enjoy a similar view to this today to this day. Okay, so there was a road here for real. Now, if we look over these same areas of this road, you will notice that there are a lot of rocks in the way and whatnot, because when you want to get rid of a road or a trail, you place brush, you put logs there, and then you indiscriminately drop rocks along it. This road went like this, and then it curved along where we're actually going to walk next and went up the hill toward Little Round Top here. Anything you want to add here, ma'am?
Oh, this is actually one of the best views. If Little Round Top is very busy, come down to the lower northern slope and you can get a beautiful view from the top up here. You can see down to what looks like the Taj Mahal, and that's the Pennsylvania Monument, looking up Cemetery Ridge, and it'll give you an idea of just how impressive Big Round Top is, then down to Little Round Top, and then to the two lower hills of Swishers and Munshauer's Knoll. So you can see how if you're a Confederate and you get up to this point, you can feel pretty good about yourselves, but the problem is you have to get to this point. And there's some men from Maine, New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania. They're going to be up here trying to stop these rebels from getting up here.
Good, thanks, Kris. And we're not going to go quite all the way up to it because we'll have to backtrack. But if you look at the 146th monument, that's Kenner Girard, actually, who commanded the brigade after other changes are taking place in the 5th Corps. On the side of it, it would say, from this position, General Meade actually observed the battle. More specifically, in the rocky pen that's right behind it, there's a place where you can stand in perfect security behind big boulders. And Meade and Sedgwick and Warren and Pleasanton and Crawford and Sykes were all there in the same place right after Pickett's charge. I mean, no rest for the weary. The Union repelled the attack, and within an hour or so, General Meade, by 5 p.m., has ordered General Crawford to clear the woods out here. So again, this is after the fighting for Little Round Top, after Pickett's charge. There's still more happening. The Confederates are still in those woods and around the wheat field there. So the Pennsylvania reserves and a few others move out. The Confederates had already begun to pull back, but there is a sharp fight in the wheat field. Maybe we'll talk about that on one of our next videos here, as the reserves try to clear out some of Benning's Georgians who are actually, positioned in and around there. So if you want to stand right in the footsteps of Meade, or if you're a Sedgwick or a Pleasanton, I don't meet too many Pleasanton fans, as a matter of fact, but he did look cool, or Warren or Sedgwick or whoever else, or Crawford, go ahead and stand in the rocky pen right behind there and be careful if you're going to do it.
Yeah, just to add on, Sedgwick's our 6th Corps commander. Alfred Pleasanton's our horse chief. He's our cavalry commander for the Union. Samuel Wiley Crawford, he had witnessed the Civil War start at Fort Sumter, and he's commanding a division here at Gettysburg. And Gouverneur K. Warren's the chief topographical engineer of the Army.
Good, and remember, you've got Henry Warner Slocum, who is derided as not being too fast as Slow Cum, and you've got Tardy George Sykes. I mean, these nicknames could be brutal, and sometimes they were right on the money. I don't know how you feel about those, Kris.
Absolutely. Their friends knew them the best, just like they know us today, and they're going to give them some great nicknames over the years. So as we're making our way through here, this is a little bit of a jungle, but it is great if you have the opportunity to walk down some of these paths on northern Little Round Top. We're on the northern slope. The main battle took place on the southern slope. Today we call that Vincent Spur. Obviously, we wouldn't have called that Vincent Spur on July 2nd, 1863. It's named after 26-year-old Erie, Pennsylvania native, Strong Vincent, who's in charge of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Division of the 5th Army Corps.
Let's pause for a second and talk about him. Now, by the way, we are on the original Sykes Avenue. So this thing was making hairpin turns and all over the place. And what I want to say is that, we weigh this stuff all the time. We have to weigh preservation and restoration and protection of the resource. When they built these roads, make no mistake, the roads might be 15 feet wide, but you have to, grade the land on both sides, and whatnot. So at what point should visitor access, be more important than the protection of the resource? Obviously, why would you preserve the land if nobody can get to it or have to walk 10 miles to get to it? So, weighing that, the Trust does this all the time, and we appreciate you members who support our restoration efforts. Opening up a place to the public has a whole different set of things on your battlefield. So keep in mind, the Park Service still struggles with this, as do all battlefield stewards. Now, let's walk a little bit further away from the group so we don't disrupt them at all. It is the anniversary, and there are people at Gettysburg and whatnot. What's not here are the Brood 10 cicadas, or Brood X cicadas, you might see, which were here in profusion for the last month, and now they seem to be gone. So as we're going to sort of flank the position to avoid the group, what I would say is, Kris, and maybe I'll grab the camera from you here. How did Vincent come to be at this place? Was he ordered here? Did he do it on his own?
I think that's a question that's still not completely answered by history. Strong Vincent, who's in charge of a brigade for the first time in a battle, is going to arrive here on Little Round, or in the vicinity of Little Round Top, near 5 to 5:30 in the evening of July 2nd. As he arrives out into this area, there are a couple stories. One says that General Barnes, his division commander, is going to send word to Vincent to send him up here. There's another story where Vincent is going to stop an aide saying, "What are your orders? Give me your orders." And that person, Will Randall Mackenzie, will tell him what to do, and then up the hill will come Strong Vincent. Regardless, it seems like Strong Vincent is going to find his way up here, and he's going to come up here first. Strong Vincent's 26 years old. He is a Harvard graduate. He is not a trained military man, but he said the day before the Battle of Gettysburg that it would be, to paraphrase, an honor to die for his country on the soil of Pennsylvania. So Strong Vincent, when he comes up here, he'll be one of the first officers onto Little Round Top. Now, there was a signal station set up right about where you can see this group standing there, and we're trying to be a little bit quiet to be respectful. The signal station's been up here throughout the afternoon of July 2nd, and they've watched James Longstreet's column of about 14,000 Confederates start to make their way towards us. Longstreet tries to do this in secret, but he pops up over top of a hill and boom, he's in full sight of these guys. So now these wigwag flags go back and forth, signals go up and down the line, and now we start to see Gouverneur Kimball Warren arrive here. 33 years old, West Point graduate of the class of 1850. Gouverneur Kimball Warren will arrive up here and start surveying the situation. We talked a little bit about him earlier, but he is the chief topographical engineer of the Army. Beautiful artist if you ever look at any of his drawings. Terrible handwriting, ironically. In the midst of this campaign on June 17th, as Joe Hooker's army's trying to make it up into Pennsylvania or figure out where Robert E. Lee's going, he goes off to Baltimore and gets married to a lady named Emily Welsh, who had been the sweetheart of A.P. Hill. So if you ever read Gouverneur Kimball Warren's letters, they're just like us. It's like, hey, guess what I did to A.P. Hill today in future battles? Look at your bow now. Kind of reminding his wife about, the former fling that she had with A.P. Hill. But Warren, when he comes up here, is now going to realize the gravity of the situation. He's going to act on the spot. He's going to start sending his staff to find those troops of the 5th Corps who'll be marching right behind me up the Wheatfield Road. He himself will ride down, find an old brigade. Ironically enough, was a brigade he commanded prior to taking over the chief topographical engineer position of the Army. He'll find a commander, a young man named Patty O'Rourke, 27 years old, graduates in the West Point class of June of 1861. Top of the class, bottom of that class is George Custer. He's the GOAT, as he's known. And so he will start sending those troops up this way. And in the meantime, Strong Vincent's up here, and he's going to start to look around. He's going to start to scout himself, see where the best position will be. He has a beautiful view, and he sees that the Confederates are starting to wrap around the left of Sickles' line. So he decides to push his men to the south. Ironically, he doesn't do it with as much speed as you would think. We talk about the race to Little Round Top. The Confederates don't know there's a race yet. The Union kind of does. But Strong Vincent, when you read how these units come onto line, the 20th Maine, the famous 20th Maine, talks about coming onto line on the right by files in a line. It's a very slow maneuver to methodically put your men onto a line. Basically, your front rank deploys while your rear rank holds time and then eventually deploys as well. So he has a little bit more time than we think. But he's going to start sending troops out in front of us. He'll send out Company A of the 83rd Pennsylvania and Company B of the 44th New York to be the skirmishers. Also coming up here will be 16th Michigan, 20th Maine, 83rd Pennsylvania, 44th New York. They will put the first Union troops to arrive up here. There'll be a reshuffling of the line where the 16th Michigan will be on the right side. To their left will be the 44th New York, 83rd Pennsylvania, finally the 20th Maine. The 83rd Pennsylvania and 44th New York like to fight beside one another. When the two units came into the Army together, the 44th New York helped out the 83rd Pennsylvania. It was a wet night, they had no blankets or tents, and they brought them together. The two units like to fight beside one another through the war, and they got the nickname the Potomac Blues. And that is how they want to fight here at Gettysburg. So that's how we'll start to see our men coming up into line. And Strong Vincent, an untrained military man who's learning on the job, decides that he's going to put up his defensive line in the right place at the right time. So it just shows these calculated risks that will be taken by these Union soldiers that we'll see, like a Gouverneur Warren, like a Patty O'Rourke, who we'll talk about, like a Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, though he might be a little overblown in his own mind, and others, like a man named Homer Stoughton, with the 2nd U.S. Sharpshooters will turn the tide of battle up here at Little Round Top.
Cool. Very cool. And Kris, well, first of all, you're with the American Battlefield Trust. We're on Little Round Top, and we're trying to cover as much of the hill as we can because Little Round Top will be closed for a year to a year and a half. Sometime later this year. So we hope that our numerous videos that we've taken up here over the years might serve as some poor replacement. We also have a good video called Unknown Little Round Top, where you can see it in the winter, where we talk about the nerdiest of the nerdy. So I'll encourage you to watch that as well. I've also heard some of the units in Vincent's brigade also called the Butterfield Twins before as well. So pretty interesting, named after Daniel Butterfield, who designed one of the monuments here and maybe had something to do with writing the tune Taps. So this is the view on Little Round Top, but this is the most famous view, but this is mostly skirmishing and sharpshooting back and forth. I don't mean that the U.S. sharpshooters are up here, the Confederate sharpshooters, but they're just sniping back and forth for 22 hours after the battle for Little Round Top. To be clear, no Confederates really came up the hill this way, although they did try. They didn't make it any farther than the very bottom of the valley of death over there, okay? So this is the view we all come up for, and I love taking guided tours up here so that people can gape and wow, because the view is much better than people expect. Now, some of the soldiers up here, of course, are also Charles Hazlett. This is Battery D, 5th U.S., and he's up here, and he's friends with General Stephen Weed, okay? And I think you may have heard this story before, and it looks like we got a guided tour, so we'll get out of his way here. Hazlett is commanding his guns, up in this area, and from what I can tell, his right piece would have been right over there, right near here, and he's up here with his friend General Weed, and Weed is shot, supposedly on this rock right behind me here, and, he says, I am cut in two, I want to see Hazlett. And he brings Hazlett over here, and or Hazlett is brought over here, and Hazlett supposedly bends down to hear his friend's dying words. His dying words, I'm as dead a man as Julius Caesar. And Hazlett is then shot dead upon the body of his dying friend. And supposedly it happened on this rock. We have early photos that talk about this being the rock, and it's hard to see today, but it says, Hazlett fell here, commanding, C-O-M''G, Battery D, 5th U.S. in battle, July 2nd and 3rd, 1863. So this is, and from all the research I've done, this is a pretty plausible location for it. That rock carving has been here since 1865 at the latest. So we are talking about, the earliest monuments at Gettysburg are not of stone, they are in stone.
And there's a great story that goes along with Stephen Weed and his ultimate demise. He's taken to the Jacob Weichert farm, which is along the Taneytown Road, and there he is supposedly put in the basement, and a young lady named Tilly Pierce is there, and she describes seeing Weed down there and him making him a promise that she would see him the next morning because he knew that he would die on July the 3rd. And she ran downstairs in the morning of July the 3rd only to find out that Weed was dead. And as staff officers over his body asked the young lady if she knew who he was. She said no, and he will tell her that this is General Weed of New York. West Point class of 1854, graduated with Oliver Otis Howard. Jeb Stuart killed at the age of 31 here at Gettysburg.
Wow, and he had a very promising career, especially ahead of him. Before he, like so many others, were cut down. There's about 1,200 casualties in the battle for Little Round Top. It is one of the less costly engagements on the second day at Gettysburg, actually. I mean, Devil's Den, the wheat field, the peach orchard, all resulted in more casualties. Now we're going to have a guest coming up, but we're going to pass this location. Maybe we'll come back to this plaque here, and maybe we'll come back to a guy with a shiny nose that you're going to see over here. I think you know him. He is Patty O'Rourke. But to keep this in chronological order, we really need to cover a little bit of the other fighting before, and of course that's the fight of Vincent's brigade. We have covered it on numerous videos before, but I think it bears a little bit of repeating. So I guess I'm going to suspect that our guest, our secret guest, is hiding very close nearby, and I hope she can hear that we're not going to quite introduce her yet. We're gonna wait a minute before we get to her, and we are going to talk about this fighting, and then we'll introduce our guest. So in summary, I think this is the side of the hill where everything happened. I want to set up our next set here. This is where Vincent's brigade was put down. As Kris mentioned, the 16th Michigan, the 44th New York, the 83rd Pennsylvania, the 20th Maine, way behind me in the woods here. Vincent didn't put his men on the crest. He put them down on the military crest, where guns can fire over your head, where you don't form a silhouette. where if you have to fall back, you're still on the hill where you can maximize your field of fire over there. And to be clear, the field of fire was much further than you see. A lot of those woods down on the lower slopes of Big Round Top were much further away. The Confederates had more open ground to cross. The Texans who were attacking this area attacked the repulsed, they attacked the repulsed again, and now they try to work their way around the line of the men from Michigan over there, okay? The Confederates are actually, the Texans are on this plateau right here, the one that is right below us, okay? So let's pause for a second here, because right at that key moment, now the fight has begun to move further over into the woods over there, where the Alabama and Maine troops are going to struggle with each other, and with some Pennsylvania troops as well. So we're gonna get into that in a separate video, I believe, but for now, the disaster, the critical point, what I call it, is the Texans are already on that plateau, a couple hundred of them maybe, and up comes one of the reinforcing regiments, the lead element of Weed's brigade, the 140th New York from Rochester. To talk about that is our good friend, and here she is. Come on down, Carol. Dr. Carol Reardon, Gettysburg Foundation, Gettysburg College. You know her already. How you doing?
Every day an adventure.
Every day an adventure, like that. Take it away.
There you go. We know that one of the things that we're talking a lot about this year in particular is about the soldiers and their units. And Garry just told you about the 140th New York and how they're from Monroe County. Now, the big city in Monroe County is Rochester, but the soldiers I want to tell you about come from all the little small towns outside of Rochester, especially to the west. Places like Clarkson and Ogden and Sweden and a few others like that, including one called Chili, spelled chili but pronounced Chili, which I learned the hard way, as we learn many things. Those small towns, in many ways, were a lot like Gettysburg. They were about the same size. The rhythms of their lives would have been very familiar, whether you lived in that part of New York or here in Gettysburg. That part of New York, back in the 1830s and 40s, had undergone a great deal of religious revivalism. And in fact, they called it the Second Great Awakening. And the fervor was so intense in that part of the country that they called that part of Western New York the burnt over district because of the intensity of the religious fervor. Some of that legacy was still around at the time of the Civil War. And it would have a huge impact on the soldiers who decided to enlist in what became Company A of the 140th New York Infantry. Usually whenever we talk about a big fight like Gettysburg, and say, let's go and see what the newspapers have to say about it, they talk about the entire battle, or they will talk about one soldier from a hometown that became a casualty. Here in those little small towns, that little cluster of neighboring towns just west of Rochester, they had to mourn the loss of 6 of their young men, all in this one battle. The fight here probably didn't last much more than a half an hour or 45 minutes, but for Company A of the 140th, it would be a fatal engagement indeed. Whenever they published an obituary in the paper, it wasn't just simply name and date and when the person died. There was almost always a comment on the content of the young man's character. If you're looking for another new book to read, there's a book called This Republic of Suffering by Drew Gilpin Faust, which talks an awful lot about something called a good death. One that basically says that you die among friends, that you die for a good cause, and that you die with a preparation to meet your maker. And basically what the eulogy here would say is that these 6 young men from Company A of the 140th died good deaths. So who were they, and what did we learn about them? When they first led off with this obituary, they focused on a young man by the name of George V. Steele. George Steele was only 19 years and 10 months old. They got that specific telling you about him. And he was killed here instantly on the 2nd of July. About him, they wrote, "A young Christian fellow soldier writes to his stricken parents, the conduct of your son since he's been in the Army has been such as to warrant the belief that the guidance of his ways has been committed to a higher power than man's, and that he was daily strengthened and supported by something that can only be found at the feet of Jesus." Also at the same time, and it's interesting because the next several paragraphs all begin with that same phrase, also at the same time, fell Corporal Theodore B. Whipple of nearby Sweden. Steele had been from Clarkson. Whipple was from Sweden. He was a member of the Presbyterian Church at Brockport. He was a living Christian, beloved by all who knew him, a dutiful son and an affectionate brother. Also at the same time fell Private David Allen, also of Sweden and a member of the same Presbyterian Church, who was an earnest Christian and a faithful Sabbath school teacher, and in all the relations of life, an ornament to the Christian profession. Also at the same time, I think they're using some literary artistry here to make the point over and over again that this list does not end quickly. Kinsey Stottle of Ogden, age 32, the only married man on the list here. Herbert Saylor, or perhaps his name is Herbert Taylor. The records are uncertain here. Aged 19 years, of Sweden. And George S. Hoyt, a private who's only 18 years old, also of Sweden. All three of them were exemplary in their conduct and lived under the guidance of the principles of the gospel of Christ. A lot of this information came from their company commander, Captain Milo Starks, who had raised the company at the beginning of the war. He was acknowledged to be a leader of the of religious faith in the company, and in time he will be promoted to major. He'll last about another 10 months. He'll be killed in action at Spotsylvania. I said earlier that a good death had to be one that was experienced with friends around them, as happened with these soldiers. Preparation to meet one's maker, which seems pretty obvious here, but also had to be in a good cause. And the summary paragraph tells us why these men were here. Thus have fallen many noble young men, victims of the demon of secession. But their sorrowing friends sorrow not as those who have no hope, but have evidence that through the strife of battle, they have entered the heavenly city, the abode of eternal peace and joy. Lest anybody make fun of the faith of these young men and the way they regularly expressed it through such things as being notorious for having a company in which you never heard profanity around the campfires at night, the eulogist concluded with a final interesting sentence. They were called by the thoughtless around them the American Tract Society Company. Back then, if you wanted to share your faith, you handed out Bibles or religious tracts. And this group of young men, Company A, 140th New York officially, was known by some as the American Bible Tract Company, or the American Tract Society Company. For every soldier's story that you hear, remember that there is a line that goes from that soldier straight back to a hometown, to a home community. And in a battle like Gettysburg, where probably multiple strands are going back to one or two towns, they're not going to feel that as simply families. They're going to feel it as entire communities, entire church congregations, entire schools, entire towns. It's one of those things that we need to appreciate. The war makes itself most apparent here on the hillside at Gettysburg, but it's felt in ripples all across the country in small towns, both north and south.
Thanks so much, Carol. I mean, you're so great at these individual soldiers. Were you always like this from the time you've been studying the Civil War?
No, not really. I think we all got into it the same way, looking at the big battles and the gee whiz part. A lot of this really began when I was working on the Field Guide to Gettysburg, when I was trying to figure out how to tell the story in ways that could touch as many different people as possible. And there are a lot of people who get really bored of hearing generals this and brigade this, but it's hard to turn away from a story where there's an element of it that you can relate to. We can relate to these people because they came from small towns, because many of them had their lives ahead of them, because they had parents, because they had religious faith, because they had a belief in a cause. There's things about them that we can hook onto. And I think that's what really got me started trying to tell their stories. My only requirement when I was working on the Field Guide was the soldiers I profiled had to never have been profiled anywhere else before. Open up the casualty list and go, that guy, and then find his story. There's a lot more stories to tell. Every soldier has one.
And Carol's always finding those. That's the Field Guide to Gettysburg and the Field Guide to Antietam. And it's, who fought here, what happened here, who lived here. It's a really interesting approach. UNC Press, we suggest you get the books. They're really good things. So, we were also continuing on that theme. She noted how many people, whether it not be at Gettysburg or elsewhere, suffered later in 1864, their soldier experience, this was just one of them. But as far as summing up what happens here, Patty O'Rourke in charge of the 140th New York, this will be his last day. Strong Vincent will be mortally wounded here. Norvell Welch of the 16th Michigan will be killed at the Battle of Peebles Farm the following September. The 44th New York, James C. Rice is dead the following year. Orpheus Woodward is terribly wounded at the Battle of the Wilderness in 1864, and he's mustered out. Who is around to tell the story? Who's alive? Who could write really well? Joshua Chamberlain, the 20th Maine, is there, and we're going to hear from him. This is part one of our Little Round Top video. We're going to pick it up with another guest as well. I think you'll enjoy this as we cover a little bit more of Little Round Top, not only the well-known, but a little bit of the less well-known as well. Thank you so much, Carol, for joining us throughout, on and off throughout this anniversary. Thanks to Kris for shooting. Thank you all for supporting battlefield preservation and education.